Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon. You know, I've been thinking a lot lately about helping people who are new to JRPGs find a way to break into the genre. Because let's be real, JRPGs are a pretty confusing genre when you get right down to it. They have so many interlocking systems that are so difficult to learn and take so much time that it can be, frankly, overwhelming for people who haven't grown up playing these sorts of games. In order to understand the more complicated JRPG systems, you really need to establish a foundational base, right? You would not want to jump into a game like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 without any prior knowledge of JRPGs, because there are so many complicated systems in that game that you would just frankly be overwhelmed. And I can't imagine it would be a lot of fun. For people like me who've been playing JRPGs basically our entire conscious lives, we have that foundation already built. We played simple, basic JRPGs from the very beginning and learned these sort of foundational systems, right? What has happened over the years is developers have taken those basic foundational systems and built upon them. So when we play a new game, we may not know exactly how to play it right away, but we already have a foundation of knowledge that we can build from, right? So learning the new systems in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is not going to be as overwhelming for me as it is for somebody who's never played a JRPG in their life. I mean, honestly, it was still a little overwhelming for me too. But you get my point, right? Like, there's already something there to build on. The best JRPGs for beginners are the ones that focus in on those sorts of foundational systems and concepts. Now, you've probably seen a lot of JRPGs for beginners guides on YouTube, and I think that's great, but I wanted to do it a little bit different than I've seen it done before. I wanted to bring in someone to kind of test this out, to prove whether or not these games that I've selected because of their foundational elements are actually useful for getting someone into JRPGs. So with that in mind, I would like to bring in my wife, Jen.
Hello.
So Jen, you haven't really played much in the way of JRPGs in your life, is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. So to kind of establish like a baseline for where you are, can you talk a little bit about your history with video games in general, like from your earliest years to today?
Earliest memories of video games would be at my aunt's house playing Super Mario, and I don't know which one. And my sister gave me Mario, and I always had to be Luigi, and I would die immediately. And we recently retried this, and I also, once again, died first Goomba. So nothing much has changed in that realm. I did have a pocket Game Boy, Ice Blue, and a Nintendo 64 at one point as well. And then just watched some friends and stuff play Sonic. We played lots of Sims. Does that count?
That's a video game, sure, yeah.
Played Sims, and then now I'm more into like cozy gaming.
So tell me about some of the games that you've played most recently.
Animal Crossing, played a lot of that, different versions of it. Played Tingle Tower. What was the Chicory?
Chicory, right.
Yeah. Unpacking.
Right.
Unpacking. Mm-hmm. And then some French one. It was like a watercolor looking thing.
Oh yeah, what was that one called? That wasn't Gris, was it?
Didonye.
Oh, Didonye, yeah.
Something like that.
I think that's right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And which one are you playing now?
Ace Attorney.
Okay. Yes, we just picked up the Ace Attorney trilogy from PlayAsia. I'm glad to finally have that. I completely missed out on that entire series, so I'm excited to at least watch her play it. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about JRPGs, so let's get into it. So you have very, very limited JRPG experience and relatively limited video game experience. Like, you've played a little bit over the course of your life, probably more so in recent years than in most of your life, right? Yeah, I'm an influencer. Influenced her. Okay, so with all of that established, I want to talk about the plan for this video. So I have 3 games picked out for you to play. And what I'm going to do is introduce you to the game. You'll play it for a bit, at least long enough to kind of form your initial impressions of it. And then we will reconvene to talk about your experience with that game. And I'll have some questions for you about the experience as a beginner to JRPGs to kind of get a sense for whether that particular game meets the criteria of being good for beginners. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, let's get on to the games. So the 3 games we're going to talk about in this video are Super Mario RPG, Undertale, and Final Fantasy. This is the Pixel Remaster Collection 1 through 6. Specifically, we're going to focus on Final Fantasy 4. Okay, Final Fantasy 4. All right, let's get into it. I chose Super Mario RPG for the Switch because it primarily uses a lot of those sorts of baseline, foundational mechanics I was talking about. You have attacks, you have magic or skills, you have items, and that's pretty much it. You have stats that are relatively easy to comprehend, and everything is presented in a way that is the exact opposite of intimidating, at least in my view. Having the option of choosing a difficulty level is also great when suggesting a JRPG for beginners, so she decides to go with breezy mode here. I think she can be forgiven for assuming she needs to jump on these dudes. Mario games have always been about jumping on enemies, and honestly, it is kind of weird that you don't get any kind of bonus for jumping on a thing to initiate combat. It's also super hard to try and jump on enemies from a 3/4 perspective in general. The options you have in battle are, like I said earlier, pretty straightforward, and the nice thing about this game is that the actions themselves are even laid out the same way as the buttons on the controller. It's actually really smart design, and it's super helpful at making the game feel more inviting. One potential downside to Super Mario RPG from a beginner's perspective is that there is quite a bit of platforming involved, and like I said earlier, trying to jump precisely from a 3/4 perspective isn't the easiest. Fortunately, the game is pretty forgiving and doesn't really penalize the player in any real meaningful way if they miss a jump. It's more of an inconvenience, really. Leveling up does a good job of breaking down exactly how you're getting stronger. The stats here are all very basic and straightforward. We're not dealing with things like dexterity or intelligence or anything more esoteric. You have attack, defense, magic attack, and magic defense, and HP, of course. It avoids overwhelming the player with a whole bunch of confusing information. For this video, she played up through the first major boss of the game, which is Claymorton. Naturally, seeing my darling wife take down a big baddie in a JRPG filled my heart with pride. So with that, let's reconvene and see what she thought. Okay, we're back. So, Jen, you have successfully completed... So how far did you get in Super Mario RPG?
I got the first star.
Okay. So that's basically through Bowser's Keep, through the Mushroom Kingdom, through the Bandit Way, back to the Mushroom Kingdom with the bouncy guys, the pogo stick dudes, fighting the big pogo stick dude and getting the star.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's like, I mean, probably, I don't know, what is that percentage-wise, 10% of the way through the game. So a decent chunk, certainly enough to like get a general sense for how things go. There's more to it. Obviously, there's more party members to get. I think you ultimately get like 5 people in your group. And there's a whole lot more story and places to visit, but we're just trying to give you a taste of each of the games to see like kind of what your impressions are and if it's the sort of game that you think you would play. So I have a few questions that I've prepared. Not just 2 seconds before we started filming this. Definitely thought about it for a long time before that. So maybe to begin, just tell me about the overall experience of playing it, like your overall impressions.
I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, honestly. There's some parts that I would say it was easier than I thought it would be. There's some things that I found a little frustrating, but I guess I was anticipating to be frustrated anyway, so...
What would you, if you had to pick a favorite part or aspect of the game, what would that be?
I like it when I got the bonus attack things.
So like when you have to time the button presses?
Kind of. I mean, I hated it when I had to defend myself because I could never get, but I liked being successful. Had the bonus attack, that was satisfying.
So you liked winning and you disliked losing, is what you're saying? Okay. Counter to that, what was your least favorite part? And don't say missing the attack. Pick something else. What was your least favorite element?
Jumping.
Jumping, yes.
Ugh.
Yeah, in the overworld. So that kind of ties into another question I had, which is like the overall exploration of the world, like all the stuff you do outside of combat. What were your thoughts on that?
I liked it once they gave me a map.
She loves maps. Loves maps.
I kind of wish that there's maps of the different areas, though, where the bandit area or the kingdom or whatever. So I know, like, this is the building where you go for purchasing items.
Oh, like area maps versus the world map.
Yes,
okay.
I would have found that.
There's certain things that you'll pick up as you play through the game. So, like, when you see a spinning mushroom on a house, you'll learn that means, like, the general store. That's where you buy stuff. When you see a spinning star, you'll see that in every town. So you'll start to realize, okay, this means this is the inn and that sort of thing. Like, so there's iconography that will eventually, you didn't get far enough in this play session to, like, see that. But they do try to address that.
Zooming out on a map so I know which little...
Oh, like where things are in relation to each other? Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And then the combat. So you already talked a little bit about the timed button presses, but, like, what did you think of the combat experience? Because you haven't played much in the way of, like, turn-based combat
and that was
before.
one of the things that I was, like, looking forward to the least. Because a lot of the games I play do not have combat in them, and I'm fine with that. So I was kind of dreading it, but like I said, it was pretty satisfying when I was able to actually do it successfully. It wasn't as bothersome to have multiple characters. I thought that would be a little bit more confusing. I know for me, a lot of the times I had questions for you. You were able to explain it to me in terms of Dungeons & Dragons, because I've played that. So I feel like someone who hasn't played that, they might have those same questions, but the explanations would require more, I think, for someone that doesn't have that background.
Well, and to be clear, like, a lot of her questions were like, well, how do we know whose turn is in which order and stuff? And I was like, well, think of it as like rolling for initiative in Dungeons and Dragons. Like, everybody rolls and then the dungeon master knows what order they go in. And in this game, in a lot of games, there's like a turn order where you can see, okay, this is the initiative, this is how it plays out. In, like, Mario RPG, there isn't a turn order, so you don't actually get to see it. It's like just invisible. So things like that. Yeah. I mean, they're the sorts of things that, as somebody who's played JRPGs for a long time, you just sort of know that, you intuit it, you don't even really think about it anymore, but it's interesting to see somebody coming in without any kind of, like, real JRPG experience and having that question, like, why, like, what's the order? Like, how does this work? And it's a perfectly valid question, and I think that's why a lot of games use a turn order, because it just makes that apparent. So the big question is, like, do you think overall that this is a good JRPG for someone like you who's just starting out? Like, does it do the things it needs to do to allow you to be able to experience the game in full, you think?
I think it does. My one thing is, like, how long things take. I think you said that I was playing for about 2 hours, and it didn't feel like it was 2 hours. Still felt like it was at least a good hour or so, and knowing that I'm only like a tenth of the way through is kind of, that is a lot more game to play. So I enjoyed playing the game. I just wish that it was shorter. So if there's a JRPG out there that has some similar elements, but it's going to take less time to complete the overall thing, I think I'd appreciate that. I don't think the story's going to be that interesting, but I wasn't really expecting it to be.
It's a Mario game.
Peach is going to get kidnapped and Mario's going to save her, and
right.
That's all that ever happens. So I'm assuming that's going to be the case this time around. So even if I don't finish it, I think I know what's going to happen.
I mean, you might be surprised, actually. You might be surprised about that. Yeah, I mean, so Mario RPG actually is on the shorter side for JRPGs. So, I mean, if you look at some of the games you've played, like Chicory and some of these other games, like, if you look at the hour count, I think you might be surprised at how long they are. So it's really, it's a matter of, like, you're not going to sit down and play a JRPG, even a shorter one like Mario RPG, in a session or two. Like, it's something you play over the course of a couple of weeks. And so, like, if you put an hour in here, an hour in there, you're experiencing the story, you're having fun with it, and you're not trying to rush to finish it. Like, you know, when I was reviewing games for publications, I would have to, like, rush through a game because, like, I have a deadline, and that's never a great way to experience a game. So my advice, and this is up to you to take or not, is, like, just take your time. If you want to play more of it, just, like, take your time with it. And this goes for everybody that's, like, starting out with JRPGs. don't try to like overdo it. Like take it a step at a time. Don't dive in all, like you're going to play an 8-hour session and finish it. Like probably not. I would guess Mario RPG is probably 15 to 20 hours total, maybe. Let me know if you think I'm wrong in the comments, but I'm pretty sure I recall it's pretty short, relatively short game. There's bonus stuff you can do, but like just plowing through the main story, probably like 15, 20 hours. So do you think you might continue playing it now that this part of this experiment is done?
Yeah, I think I would pick it up again. Especially if it doesn't hurt to have some time in between. Like, I don't know, like we said with this one, the story probably isn't as heavy as some of the other games, so I don't know how much time is good to leave in between some of those other games that you might have on the list for me. But for something like this, if it's something that I can kind of pick up and go back and forth, which is why I like things like Animal Crossing too. So I either like the story to be like done with right away, or I can come and go as I please. So yeah, I'd like to see. I'd be interested in seeing how it would go coming back to like next week or something.
Yeah, it's like Mario RPG compared to a lot is really much more of a comedy. Like it's not like you said, you're not expecting a serious dramatic story. It's a comedy 100%. But like it is like there's some interesting things that happen, and the way the characters come together is interesting and pretty cool. So I recommend it if you want to make the time for it, but the choice is yours. Final Fantasy IV was the first JRPG I really poured my whole self into. I played a ton of Dragon Warrior back on the NES, but I never really came close to beating it. Final Fantasy IV was the first game where I was fully committed to finishing it, and that was largely because the story was so compelling. As a starter RPG, I'd be hard-pressed to think of one that's better. Not only because the story is so good, but because it came out in the early days, back before there were layers and layers of interlocking systems at play. The stats are more complicated than Super Mario RPG, but not too overwhelming. And anyway, I never paid attention to them as a kid, and it didn't negatively affect my playthrough. The Pixel Remaster is such a fantastic way to experience this game, if for no other reason than the music. The 16-bit sound chip will always have a special place in my heart, but for someone who didn't grow up with that sound, like my wife for example, it might not be as appealing. The option of having beautifully orchestrated music that brings out the true appeal of these songs is fantastic. Final Fantasy IV is my pick for most beginner-friendly Final Fantasy, but really, the Pixel Remaster of any of them will probably serve you pretty well. I noticed a lot of hesitancy in her playstyle. The active time combat in particular was a bit on the stressful side, I think, in ways I didn't expect it to be. It's hard for me to send my mind back in time to when I was a kid and experiencing this sort of RPG for the first time, but I imagine I similarly struggled with how to keep up with the sort of frantic pace of the combat. The difference between her, a grown woman, and me at the time, an 8-year-old boy, is that I had basically unlimited time to play and learn the combat, whereas she has a job and responsibilities that make that much more of a challenge. All in all, I really got the sense that she was experiencing more frustration than fun here, but let's go back to the desk and see what she thought. Okay, we're back. We've spent a good deal of time with the beginning parts of Final Fantasy IV. We got up through, for those of you who know, we got up through to where the antlion comes in, where you go to get the sand ruby to heal Rosa of the desert fever. We got into the antlion den, and we decided to cut it there. So, okay, having played the first 90 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it was, of Final Fantasy IV, how would you describe, just tell me about your overall experience with the game.
I think I would like it if I didn't have to do any battles.
So you don't like fighting?
Don't like fighting.
What is it about the battles that was not, didn't work for you?
So there's just like too many options of what I could do with too many people. Like when I play D&D, I have one character, I have the sheet, I can learn what their abilities are, what they can do, and just pull from that without being attacked at the exact same time. It was just too much happening all at once. It was overwhelming.
Yeah, the active time was a pretty big change at that point, because previously JRPGs had all been turn-based, where, I mean, this is technically turn-based, but it's like your turn can come up, you know, at the same time as an enemy's turn, and then it's, yeah, so it's a little bit complicated. We had wait mode on, but that only actually affects it when you're in a magic menu or item menu or something. So if you're just on your main battle menu there with your attack, defend, whatever, enemies can still attack. And so I noticed you were like, okay, first wrapping your head around which character am I?
Yeah.
Whose turn is it? Okay, what can they do? And then not necessarily knowing like what each of them can do.
Lots of things.
Right.
So lots of choices and like trying to read what the description is for each of the, like I don't have the time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And even graphically, like I know that there's like the arrow and it changed the color of the font and everything, but I mean, I know it's old or whatever, but like I just didn't like the graphic design of it. Like I feel like it wasn't as easy to just quickly digest with my eyes. Like it was just, oh, there's a lot, you know.
Well, I noticed too that you were struggling a little bit with like even kind of identifying what some of the sprites were supposed to be.
Yeah.
Whereas like, you know, as a kid growing up with it, it's like that was such a visual leap over the Nintendo. It was like, oh, this is like HD quality, like looking at this stuff, you know.
Like, how do I get to this thing on the map? And it's like, oh wait, I have to go under, and like it looked like it was all in the same plane, and it wasn't.
Yeah. Okay, so battles weren't great. Some issues with the visual, but if you had to pick a favorite element of it, what would you say was your favorite element of it?
This might sound silly, but I really liked the music.
Yeah.
I feel like with the Super Mario RPG or whatever we played before, like you even commented on the music. I'm like, oh, I didn't even notice it. But this, like, I noticed the music and I actually really enjoyed it.
We had the arranged tracks that by default they play the arranged tracks, so it's all like live instrumentation and stuff instead of the 16-bit. You know?
Yeah, I would not have cared for that.
Probably would not have cared for that. My next question was, what was your least favorite part? But I'm assuming it's the battles.
It's the battles.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought the story was also interesting. Like at one point, I'm like, hey, do you want to just take over battles? Because it's like, oh, I actually could see myself maybe being invested in the story, and I liked wandering around on maps. That was great. Buying things, that was great.
It could be, we could potentially tag team it because, like, with the boost options and the pixel remaster, you get 4x experience. So it's like I could just grind for a few minutes and get you like 10 levels and then let you just kind of go, you know. So yeah, I mean that's a possibility. So how was the combat? I'm not going to ask because we already know. So tell me a little bit more about the exploration. Like one thing that I noticed about you that is definitely something I don't do, which I thought was interesting, was every time you got to a new place, you like went and talked to everybody and like looked at everything and did like
I assumed that was what we were supposed to do, I guess.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I know that this is maybe a JRPG that I don't think we remembered that I played a little bit of. Zelda JRPG or just RPG?
It's I mean, people would say that it's like an action adventure. Okay. I don't know, like. So
anyways, I remember playing part of a Zelda game once and breaking the pots.
Sure.
And so every time I saw a pot in this game, I wanted to like instinctively go over and like see if something was in there or break it, and can't. I think there's like once or twice that there's something there.
Is this a good beginner JRPG for somebody that to get them or you specifically into the genre?
I don't think so.
No. Tell me more about that.
The combat system is just too overwhelming. Too many things to learn in a quick amount of time while getting bombarded. It's just frustrating.
With it, being the year 2024 and like we're adults and we have responsibilities, we don't have endless time to play games. Like, I'm hoping we can find some way to like get you the baseline knowledge that you would need in order to be able to enjoy, at the very least, some more recent games. Like if going back is too much of a struggle, and that's understandable. We talked about on our podcast the JRPG Pursuit. If you haven't seen it yet, check out the link in the description to the channel for the JRPG Pursuit. But we had talked about on the podcast recently that like development of games and JRPGs in particular is like traveling down a river. And so as you go forward, new things happen and you get new advances and you learn new things. And at any point, you can go back and play one of the older games, but you've got a hard swim against the current to get back there. So it's a struggle to be able to fully experience and enjoy an older game, especially if you don't have that, if you didn't already experience it. Like I can sit down and play Final Fantasy IV, muscle memory kicks in. I don't have to think about what the spells do.
Yeah.
Like it's just kind of baked in knowledge. But if you don't have that, like hopefully we can find some games that either don't require that pre-existing knowledge or that give it to you in a way that's easier to digest for somebody with like limited time. So I don't know what the answer to that is. The next game we're going to look at, which we'll just introduce now instead of waiting 6 weeks to introduce it, is Undertale. Undertale's a bit different. I've told you a little bit about it, I know, but if any of you watching haven't played Undertale, it's a JRPG, but the combat is very, very non-traditional. Like it's sort of like a bullet hell style of gameplay, which is weird. And you probably don't have any experience with bullet hell.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Yeah. You will soon when you play Undertale, but yeah, so it's very different, but it's also like it's a JRPG that doesn't require an extensive library of knowledge of previous JRPGs. Like there may be little nuggets of insight you might have if you came in with that pre-existing knowledge, but it's not anything that's necessary, I don't think, to play the game. So anyway, that will be next, and then we'll be back to discuss final thoughts. Undertale was such a powerful and moving experience for me. It's the furthest out from what you might call a traditional JRPG, but my hope in introducing this to my wife is that it'll be something of a Trojan horse. Like, if I can hook her with a game like Undertale, with its really strong sense of humor and compelling narrative and really interesting gameplay, I think it could potentially function as a gateway drug, so to speak. The first thing I realized as I started watching her play is that her tendency to be a rule follower to a fault could potentially cause her some confusion in certain games. Like here, where she's told to wait for Toriel. Now, technically, you can wait for Toriel for 5 minutes and something will happen. I had to look it up because the idea of waiting literally never occurred to me. Though, because she left the room initially, that apparently overwrites whatever flag is in place, so Toriel won't ever come back. Now, Toby Fox thought about those people who would actually obey and not leave the room, but I'd argue that most developers are expecting you to say screw you to authority and ignore those kinds of instructions. Gotta encourage her rebellious tendencies a bit, I guess. I really worried that she would struggle with the combat. If you choose to play it as a more traditional JRPG and you fight every monster you encounter, you'll level up and get stronger and it's not as big of a deal. But she was absolutely sure she wanted to play the pacifist route, which means no HP increases for the entire game. She's also not really used to twitchy type gameplay, so some of the combat sequences were a bit of a struggle for her. But to my surprise, she never seemed to get frustrated, and when she would die, she never seemed to signal that she was over it and wanted to quit. She kept plugging away until she beat whatever she was up against. A lot of this comes down to personality. She seemed to have a lot more fun with Undertale than the other games, but we'll need to get her final thoughts before we can make any kind of definitive statement. But every person is different, so the game that works for her is probably going to be different from the game that works for your loved one. All right, let's get back to the desk and recap. So I don't know if anyone's going to notice this, but it has been like 5 years since we recorded the previous segment. So we just got done with Undertale, your initial segment of playing Undertale. So tell me, I guess, about your overall experience then with Undertale.
So going into this is the one I was looking forward.
The more you draw attention to a blooper, the more I'm going to keep it in.
So going into it, this is the one that I was most looking forward to. You've told me what the story is already, so in some ways I wish I didn't know it, because I really like this one. I can 100% see myself like finishing this one for real. So yeah, I mean, even though I thought it was going to be the one that I liked the best, I liked it even more than I thought I would. Yeah, I mean,
and you said to me after we stopped, you're like, so this is a JRPG, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I know there's people out there that would debate that and would say, no, it's made in America, it's not Japanese, therefore you can't call it a Japanese role-playing game. I think if you've watched my channel, you know how I feel about that. We've talked about it already in this video. So yeah, I mean, it's a JRPG. It's been inspired by Earthbound and games like that. Toby Fox took a lot of inspiration from the 8 and 16-bit games, and he basically put this game together almost entirely by himself. He had a couple of little things that other people did along with him, but 99% of the game he did himself: music, graphics, gameplay, everything. So what would you say then was maybe your favorite aspect of what you've played so far?
I enjoyed the doggos. I enjoyed like just the sense of humor in it, and the right, like it was definitely my sense of humor.
Yeah.
And I loved like the skeletons were named after typefaces. Like that was, as an artsy person, like I was like, bravo.
You actually revealed to me, you're like, oh, Sans is in Comic Sans, and I think that's the font that his text is. And I knew it was in relation to a font, but I just thought it was like sans serif, like a type of font, but I wasn't thinking that it's probably short for Comic Sans and he wants to be a stand-up comic. It's super obvious, and you all watching this knew that, but I didn't until tonight. So breaking news, his name is Comic Sans. He just goes by Sans. Okay. What would you say was your least favorite part?
It's hard to like, it doesn't even like immediately pop to mind because I really enjoyed it. I guess like the amount of hit points, I wish that they would have given me a little bit more, because I'm choosing to play as like a pacifist and not fight anything at all. And I know that the point is it's supposed to be hard to go that way. But at the same time, I guess if I can't have more hit points, maybe more opportunities for food or whatever can restore my HP, and maybe going further along I'll have more opportunities, or I'm learning, okay, I have to do these battles even though I'm just acting my way through it to gain the money to be able to load up on that stuff. And I finally made it to town and was able to buy a bunch of stuff, so I think that should make that a more pleasant experience going forward.
Yeah, in the beginning of the game, as you're learning everything, like you only have access to very limited healing items. And I mean, there are like a decent number of save points around that heal your HP too, but there's like challenging stuff that comes in between those save points. So like I think you'll find now that you've gotten to town, one of the towns, and you've bought a bunch of stuff, and you can like upgrade your defensive equipment too. So like when you get hit, it won't hurt as bad, so there's ways that you can help. But yeah, it is challenging because I think it's 20 HP is what you have. Yeah. And like that's it for the whole game. Like if you're playing it like any other RPG where you're killing things, you level up, you get more hit points, you get stronger.
Like 3 hits and I'm not very coordinated either. So like 3 hits and I'm dead. So I died a lot, but I think in a lot of the other 2 games I played, whenever I would die or whatever, like it would be really frustrating. It's just like, I have to keep doing this though, because I'm trying these out. And but this time, like I didn't really mind dying, I guess, because like each time, like not only are there puzzles, which I love, but even the battles are a little bit of a puzzle. And I guess that's probably the way that it is with these other JRPGs. Like you learn what particular monsters or whatever, like if they're effective against fire, electric, whatever. But like it was way more easy to pick up on that. All I had to do is like click check or something, like check in with them, and it like gave me a hint as to what to do. So I think that was very nice for someone like me that's not like wanting to spend like a ton of time trying to figure that stuff out. Let me get into it quicker, I think.
Yeah, and you're right that like in other JRPGs, like combat can be kind of a puzzle. I think one of the cool things that Toby Fox did with Undertale is he made it literally a puzzle. Like you have to, sometimes it's obvious. I mean, sometimes you really do have to think about it and take it step by step. Like, oh, I'm going to insult this guy first, and then he feels real bad, and then I'm going to like make him feel better, and then he's going to feel better, and then you can proceed. You know what I mean? Like there's different, sometimes you have to do step by step to get through it. And
I like that, like the way to solve it kind of went with the character of the person you're interacting with. It wasn't just like random monster gets attacked by this. It's like, okay, no, this particular character didn't like being decorated this way, and so you have to like remove the decorations, or things like that. It really made sense with what that little character was.
And it was smart with that one, because I never used check when I played. I don't think I ever used check. But when you check that particular monster, it's like a terrifying, horrific reindeer with like demon eyes, and it's got stuff all over its antlers. and you check it, and it's like a bunch of high schoolers decorated it as a prank.
Yeah.
And so, like, I wouldn't necessarily have known undecorate was the thing you needed to do to it, because that seems like a weird thing. But, I mean, that's kind of like how the combat goes, is when you're playing as a pacifist, you're solving the puzzle of how to end the conflict without fighting. And, yeah, so I think that's pretty cool. So, outside of the combat then, like, what did you enjoy about the play experience outside of the combat?
I mean, I really did like any of the puzzle kind of things, just kind of moving through it. I am drawn to puzzle type games. This one reminded me a lot of another game that I played, Chicory. Because that one also has like these cutesy little animal characters, utilizes black and white and color kind of interesting ways. And then it is about like, kind of therapeutic and emotions and all that kind of stuff. As well as like the whole puzzle thing. So it's pretty reminiscent of that game, which is one that I was really into.
Mm-hmm. So the big then final question for this one is, would you say that this is a good JRPG for beginners? Like I feel like it's the one you've resonated with the most so far that you've played, but would you say that in your opinion, it's good for beginners in general?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, of course, each individual person has their own experiences with what video games, if any, that they've played, but I think more of the general population has played things more similar to like Mario, and even though that one was a Mario game, it was definitely more RPG heavy, but like Mario or Zelda kind of thing, or just regular little computer games or games on your phones that require you to do puzzles, and then just, I mean, interacting with other human beings, just knowing how to do that worked out well for knowing how to play the game.
Yeah, having empathy.
Yes. I don't know how it would be if you're playing a fighting way, but as someone who's choosing to play it completely,
yeah.
pacifist.
I've watched playthroughs of like the genocide runs and stuff, and like you can kind of ruin your game. It's interesting. Like, no, I don't want to put any spoilers on here, but you can kind of ruin your actual game doing a genocide run. So like, the thing I like about it is that I feel like Toby Fox is making a really strong point about nonviolence as a thing, because there are consequences for violence, and if you choose that violent path, like it has actual consequences in like your life, kind of based on how. I mean, there's ways around the consequences, but you know what I mean. It's interesting.
Even within the battles, like running into the areas that are blue, and it's like if you just sit through that, like go through it, then you're not going to get hurt. I think that kind of goes along with that whole concept too. Like sometimes you have to just stick with a person and see them through a difficult time, and then maybe you won't be as hurt by the situation. Right.
I thought our dog was scratching himself. He's just scratching the couch.
I can see it.
He's licking his paw.
There you go.
He's all out of focus, but Pablo, can you stop, please? Thanks, bud. Can you just wait 1 minute? We're almost done. Yes, thank you. Okay, he said yes. Okay, well, that's it. So we've seen 3 beginner-friendly JRPGs, at least in my initial assumptions. I've considered them to be beginner-friendly. And I think that how beginner-friendly any of these games is going to largely depend on the person playing them. Because, like, in Jenn's case, I think it's safe to say that Undertale probably resonated with you more than the others. If I had to put more words in your mouth, I would say maybe Super Mario RPG came next in terms of your estimation.
Yeah, I think so. Although, as far as story is concerned, that's the one I'm least invested in.
Yeah. And then Final Fantasy IV, and we had talked separately outside of this about maybe playing through that one together, because she doesn't care for the combat, but she's interested in the story, so we could like experience it. Yes, we could experience it together. And that would be that's another option for, and it's something I hadn't really considered when I've told you about games and like showed you games and you weren't necessarily interested in playing them. It's like you might be interested in the story or certain aspects of the game, and there's other parts that you're just like, well, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
So it's like, if we could do those things together.
Yeah, but purely just sitting and watching only wasn't enough for me, so I think that would be an interesting balance.
Yeah, being able to trade the controller off, like when you were kids and you had a brother or sister, friends you're playing with. Like, I guess I hadn't thought of that as a thing because it's been 25 plus years since I've like passed a controller back and forth with somebody. But that to me seems like a really viable option for being able to experience some of these games with you because, you know, I'm of course willing to play the whole thing, but like you don't want to just sit there. Like some people I know, and this may be your experience, may have a significant other that is perfectly content to just sit and watch the game and they enjoy that. And that's great. But then you'll have people that are more like Jen where they're like, they're not going to want to just sit there and just watch the game. But like if you can find ways to trade off, let them experience the parts of the game that they like to experience, and then you take the rest or whatever. I feel like that could be a good way for us to experience some of these games together that are important to me, and then kind of introduce them to you that way. And then of course there's games like Undertale maybe that you would pick up and play on your own, and that's again also totally fine. So I don't know, do you have any final thoughts on this grand experiment that we've undertaken?
I think if you're someone out there who has someone special in your life that isn't into JRPGs and you are, chances are they might be like me and they hear a lot and want to understand that whole conversation you're having. If it's something you enjoy, I want to know why. And this is a really nice way for us to kind of get that figured out. Now I feel like I know a little bit more and can appreciate it more, and I'm looking forward to trying out some more things.
Yes. So I hope that you all have enjoyed watching this. I hope maybe we were able to help you out in some way, give you some tips on how to approach this yourself. You know, like we said, everybody's going to be different, but, you know, maybe using this experiment as a starting point, you might find a way to be able to enjoy some of these games with a loved one who otherwise wouldn't. That's the high-minded goal of this endeavor, and I hope that we achieved it to some extent. Yes. Anyway, thanks again, everybody, for watching this. I hope that you enjoyed it. Please, down in the comments, if you have any suggestions of JRPGs that you think would be good for beginners, whether you've tried it out or it's just a theory, let us know down there. I'm compiling a list because I have my own thoughts, but I would love to hear from you as well. Some games that I can introduce her to, or anybody else who checks it out, down in the comments. What would I normally say here that I want people to do?
Like and subscribe. Do
that, please. Do the thing she said. The thumb and the subscribe button would be great. I really appreciate it. This channel just hit 10,000 subscribers this week when we're recording this. So that's weird and crazy to me. I'm going to do a 10,000 subscriber Q&A soon. So check the post on the community tab of the channel where I said you can leave questions if you have questions for me that you want me to answer in that Q&A. Throw one in there or shoot me a Twitter message or something. That's fine too. Anyway, once again, thanks for watching, and until next time, bye.